think there's this real misconception that you have to be this creative blue sky idea person that comes up with ideas. And I think it's my worst nightmare if someone says, let's go sit in a room and just throw stuff at a wall. So I actually think having a more analytical, potentially scientific mind can be really helpful in development.
Hi, happy Friday. Welcome to the Unscripted Files. My name is Madeline Cunningham. I am a development producer in the unscripted industry, bringing you candid conversations with the minds behind your favorite form of entertainment. Today, I have a strategic development consultant from the UK on to talk about her approach to development, differences in the UK and US market, and of course, her time as the head of development at Hidden Light Pictures, working for Hillary and Chelsea Clinton. I almost did no editing in this conversation. There was so much goodness here. Nicky is full of incredible information, which is why she also lectures at the National Film and Television School. So without further ado, can't wait to dive into this conversation with none other than Nicky Huggett. Nicky, welcome to the Unscripted Files. How you doing?
I'm good, thank you. Thank you so much for having me. It's very exciting to be here.
I'm so glad that we're getting to chat and you're joining us from across the pond. You're a strategic development consultant. You've held roles as the former head of development for Hidden Light Pictures, which is founded by Hillary and Chelsea Clinton, worked at Newtopia, and you're also a lecturer at the National Film and Television School. And right now you're kind of in the freelance world, right?
Yeah, I mean, this is a brave new world for me. I haven't been freelance since I was like a jobbing producer on the road back in 2012, I would say. So yeah, I think it was brought about. My children are very young, they're 4 and 7, and my mum is quite elderly. And it just got to the point where I just needed a bit more control over where I was working and when I was working. So it was quite terrifying, but it seems to be going really well. I think actually, it works quite well for companies when budgets are squished, that they can just have me sort of 2 days a week to help them pivot or help them understand how to pitch the American market, particular for companies over here. So yeah, it's definitely seems to be going okay so far. Still early days.
Well, I'm so happy to hear that. I mean, you have experience that anyone would die for, so it's so nice that like this offers you that flexibility. How did you get into your current career? How did you get into development? I would love to hear a bit of the origin story for you.
So I've always worked across development and production, but how I started was a bit strange. My mum is a journalist, and so I sort of always had an inkling I wanted to do something, maybe be a writer or something like that. Weirdly, I studied geology, which didn't really help me in this trying to become a journalist. So I was working as a waitress, as many of us do, like trying to work out what on earth I was going to do with my life. And I just kept applying for things that were vaguely connected to media. And the first thing I got was an internship at a company called Mentor, who made sort of a big political series called Question Time in the States. And they did formats and documentaries and science films. And I sort of turned up on my first day in a suit, embarrassingly, with three other interns. And it was amazing. It was the most incredible learning experience because being lots of genres under one roof, it meant that I could work across everything from entertainment, like big shiny floor reality shows, all the way through to really purposeful science docs. So yeah, I was lucky enough to spend 2 years there. And it sort of set me up really for life, really, in this industry, which was I know how lucky that I was to get that.
Yeah, I mean, to start there right off the bat and kind of land in development, I think is so lucky. And it's so funny. I was a biology major. You're saying you're geology. Isn't it like so funny where you actually end up? But I try not to dismiss my experience in the sciences. I'm like, you know what? This job is so research heavy. You know, it's so much of what we spend our time doing. So all the experience has to be kind of cumulative, right?
Yeah, and I always say to people when I'm teaching, because I think there's this real misconception that you have to be this creative blue sky idea person that comes up with ideas. And that's not me. I think it's my worst nightmare if someone says, let's go sit in a room and just throw stuff at a wall. I need external stimuli to come up with ideas. And I think actually the scientific mind that I have is really helpful because half of this job is going, well, what's worked? Like, what are the ratings? Like, what what can we potentially recycle from past TV gone by. So I actually think having a more analytical, potentially scientific mind can be really helpful in development.
I'm so glad you said that because I wanted to ask what about your personality and how you operate matches so well with development. So you're saying that you kind of are more of an analytical sort of right brain person.
Yeah, I think definitely. I think my other half is a true creative, and I'm quite jealous of that in a way. But I'm much more. I think my old boss used to call it that we're either develop ideas internally and send them out into the world, or we look at everything that's around us and sort of look for inspiration from lots of different places. And I think my personality, I just love facts and I love research. I loved so geeky. I loved school. I loved university. I just loved learning about things. And so for me, the joy of development is when you can go and hear someone talk about what they're looking for and analyze the trends, what formats are working. I love hanging out with distributors because they tell me about like what's working in the States or working in Asia. So, but I think personality wise as well, I do get bored quite quickly. I think I like to have lots of things on the go at the same time. I'm like definitely a multitasker, which is also very helpful when you're a mum. You have to like do lots of different things at the same time. So for me, development is joyful in that you can pick the things that you're really passionate about and sort of flip between them. And then if something's really frustrating you, you can sort of leave it for a bit and then look at something else. So yeah, I think that's why I think personality wise, even though I've done both development and production and love both, I think development, I will always be a development person. I think we're a special breed.
It's so funny what you say about, getting bored easily. I used to be really hard on myself about that, right? I'm really good at starting, not necessarily good at finishing. And I love development for that because you get to nurture a project, take it through, take it to market, hope it goes somewhere. And you're doing that with, 5, 7, 9, 10 things at a time. And it kind of has its life cycle. And then you get to go on to something new and something that's curious and interests you. And I love what you said about yes, sure, a development can be about you bringing a totally new idea and plucking it out of the sky, but a lot of it is problem solving. It's looking at the market, it's analyzing, it's listening, it's seeing what's working, it's paying attention to trends, and it's drawing lines. And I think that's what's so much fun about it. So it's so wonderful that you've got a taste of both, and you're like, development is totally where I live.
For your sanity, when you work in development, you have to have lots of things going on at the same time, because if you put all your love into one thing and then it doesn't get commissioned, or the commissioner leaves, or the buyer just decides that's not quite right, then it's heartbreaking. It's sort of, I sometimes describe it like dating. Like before I found the one, I dated quite a lot because, you want to make sure before you sort of devote all your time to that one passion project.
Absolutely. Early in my career, I kind of put all my eggs in this one basket for like a year, and it went really far and we were super close to production and it got shut down. And I just was like, oh, I can never do that again. I can never do that again. So it hurt, but it was a great lesson because you're right. You do have a lot, to have a lot of things going on. How has your development sort of process evolved over the course of your career from, the early days and how you approach it now?
I mean, I think when I was starting out, development was very much about relationships, and not that it's not now, but it was very much my boss would go out for dinner with someone who worked at a channel and come back and say, we've got a commission. I pitched him, I sent him a text message and then got a commission. So it was much more about the sort of quick fire ideas generation than it was about really building out those ideas. I think development has become a lot more like pre-production in a way, in that you have to do so much more work and build those materials and get those access in order to sort of really hit the bar of what channels require and what they require in order to part with quite a lot of money. So I think my development style, I've become a lot more focused, I would say. Much as I love to multitask, I'm also very aware that development needs to be focused, and each company that I go and work for as a development person, it's so important to understand what they have permission to pitch and to stay within those guardrails. And I think Otherwise, as one very wise producer I worked with once described development as small children playing soccer, in that you'd all run one way. Someone says, there's a channel over here looking for this. And so everyone runs that way. It's like little kids on a field playing football. So
here's the new mandate. Yeah.
Yeah, totally. Quick. So I think as I've kind of developed and evolved as a development person, I think I've just become a lot more brutal with myself. If I don't think something's going to sell, then I don't waste time on it. I've become a lot more commercial. I think it was very easy when I started out. It was purposeful one-off documentaries that sort of, especially working at the BBC and for Channel 4 in the UK, the public service broadcasters, and you could make incredible stuff, and you still can. But there's now that sort of encroaching, like terrifying mega tankers of the SVODs that you have to compete with. So yeah, I've become a lot more focused and a lot more commercial and a lot more brutal with myself.
No, I had a guest on last season, Adam Newhouse, and one of the big takeaways from our conversation was you've got to learn to put down your B projects and like your pretty good projects and focus on, what you really feel good about. Because everything is about protecting your time and your resources and your energy. And I agree. I think that's something when you're starting out, everything is a brilliant idea. It feels like you kind of learn what is more promising than not. And you have to kind of learn to put more of your resources into the things that have a better chance. And the pretty good stuff, you got to kind of learn to let go.
Yeah. Yeah, I had a boss once who used to call them half dead mice, and those were his passion projects. Ugh. You'd get £20,000 from here, and then you'd go here, and then you'd go to a festival and go around going, I've got this film. And so every so often he'd say, can I just have one? Can I have just one? I'm just going to bring in this little half dead mouse and leave it under the chair, and you can do what you want with it. And I was like, you can have one if we get some other stuff commissioned. I mean, it's hard in consultancy because sometimes when you're working with startups that are amazing producers but potentially haven't done masses of development before and don't know the market in that painfully brutal way that we do as development people, you do find yourself feeling like a really annoying agent or buyer going, I just can't sell that. It's a great idea, but I can't sell it. And an idea is only as good as where the place is for it in the market.
Absolutely. Why do you feel like doc is so hard right now? It feels like it had its heyday where it was, busting at the seams. And now no one wants to touch it. I don't want to touch it. It feels so hard, so difficult. The bar is high. But what is your take on where the state of docs in the industry right now?
I think, I remember the heyday because Hidden Light started during that heyday. And you could sell a purposeful feature doc to Netflix for over $1 million, and everyone would go, oh, this is amazing, and then it would get awards, and that's what we all dreamed of. And that sort of crazy time when the biopics, like the Elton John biopic, sold for 16 million or something, which was just madness. But now I think the main problem is there is a lack of the private funders. The private funders have sort of disappeared. Participant, for example, there's not so many funders that are looking for docs unless it's the really commercially safe options. So people like Universal Pictures are looking to replicate their success of Tina and those sort of big commercial docs that can play in theatres. So it feels like there's a real lack. Like CNN are starting to commission again, but they don't really do single docs, and everything. A lot of the things they do have to be an international co-pro, which changes the way you develop. And then obviously the place that still remains is Netflix, but their remit is so specific in sort of that domestic true crime thriller model. So I think the problem with docs is that it's just there are not that many places to take them. The UK actually remains quite a good place for docs because of those public service broadcasters. So there are still sort of doc departments at the BBC and Channel 4. But gone are the heyday of those amazing umbrella strands that we used to have in the UK, where you could, it's quite hard to make a subject matter become a series and pull it out and elongate it. Whereas, we used to have these amazing umbrella strands called One Life and Cutting Edge, and you could go, I've got an amazing 60-minute film, and there would be a place for it and people would know where to find it. But now in a world where everything is online and you have to get people to come to your film, it is incredibly difficult to get those docs to push through unless they're commercial. Superman sold Will and Harper, but they are like stardust. They just don't come along very often. But I think someone said the number of docs that gets sold at Sundance is the 1%. And that is heartbreaking that you put that much time into sort of gathering funding privately and try and sell things. And also, I think we're in a sort of bit of a polarized society in that, America, anything political, as we found at Hidden Light, anything with any sort of political message will just not sell to a network. And it's kind of hard because docs are out. The whole point of a documentary is you're making a point, you're kind of trying to get a message across. And that's why entertainment is becoming the safer, sort of more commercial, more balanced bet in 2026.
Yes, I agree. I had a doc project that it wasn't political, but everything is. Do you know what I mean? And it was about the prison system in the United States and incredible access, article options, you name it, and no one wanted to touch it. It's a tough market. I mean, so what are your thoughts on, YouTube is all the rage right now. I mean, if I was a documentary filmmaker in this day and age, I would just figure out a way I would just put it on YouTube and try to create a community there. I mean, what are your thoughts on even just self-distribution at this point in the marketplace?
I mean, I think it's still really hard with YouTube. At Utopia, I was looking at their YouTube strategy, and there still are barriers to entry, and that if you want people to watch it, it's a long burn. You've got to try and get it past a certain time and get ad sales revenue. The ad sales revenue is tiny. It's really hard to get those to break through unless you're sort of partnering with an existing channel. I mean, in this country, well, we've got places that you can go that have existing YouTube documentary channels that you can sort of place your film with, but it's still really hard. It'll be interesting to see sort of maybe potentially the growth of Mubi as a platform. We've just had one of our big documentary awards, and the one that everyone wants to win, best documentary, was a documentary funded by Mubi. So it does feel like there are new platforms that are opening up. I just was really struck by the docs that were sort of really getting critical acclaim and being watched and nominated for these big awards that came from that platform. But I think YouTube is still tricky. I think we're definitely finding that a lot of producers are looking at it as a potential, we need to be on YouTube, we need to solve this problem. But you've still then got the issue of, how do I get people to watch my stuff? If I don't have a creator attached,
Right.
if I have, do I have, where are you going to put it? Are you going to put it on your channel? No one's going to watch that. And then you've got lots of barriers and having to pay lots of money to YouTube, and it is tricky.
Yeah, absolutely. You work across the UK and US markets. It's so interesting. I remember hearing just a couple of years ago, my agent was like, I feel like everyone's pivoting and using a UK production company, and UK producers are just becoming more preferential in the market. There was just this idea that, especially on the format side, that development was just much more, it felt really thorough. But what I want to know, what are the primary differences you've observed in the markets between the US and UK, whether that's like the buying market or even just the producers themselves, the content that we're developing? What are some main things you've observed?
Well, I think the one thing is that in America, people who work at channels are called buyers, whereas in the UK, they're called commissioners.
Mhm.
And it's a bit of a subtle difference in that when we go and pitch to a UK commissioner, we often will nearly always go and see them and have coffee. Like the person from Sky Docs came into our office this afternoon and borrowed our office for a bit and then sat and had a chat and a coffee. And we talked about ideas. And it's a much more ongoing dialogue where they're all filmmakers. So its development in some ways is more of a conversation than it is a pitch process.
Collaborative.
It is completely collaborative, and that can be good and it can be bad. And it means that you don't get a quick no, you get a slow no, because they have to sort of go back and forth and think about it. It can be really great in that actually you don't get shot down really quickly, but it can be a challenge in that way. And then when you're pitching to the States, we now do increasingly have those sort of relationships with buyers, and you can get generals in with them. But if you've got a project and you think it's really great and you go to your agent and they package it, it's much more you have a commodity that you are selling to lots of people at the same time, and you do your pitch and it's half-hour pitch and it's pretty pre-scripted and you've got your sizzle, you've got your log line, and you've got that one shot to sell it. So you as a development person, you're constantly thinking like, how can I package this to make this as appealing as possible? Is there an IP connection? What director can I attach? Have I got the right showrunner? Am I even the right company? Should I be co-producing with another company to tell this story because it's slightly out of my company's guardrails? So I think it is just, it's much more formal in a way, in that you are selling. Whereas in our country, you used to get in trouble if you pitched to more than one channel at the same time. They'd get very, very cross with you, and quite often, they'd blacklist. I remember being blacklisted because I had this access that broke in the newspaper, and I old-fashioned called them up and got access to this unfolding true crime story. And I pitched it to Channel 4 and Sky at the same time, and then Channel 4 didn't speak to me for 3 months.
It's very different.
Yeah.
Here it's like you want to set as many pitches as possible.
Yeah.
Now it's crass, you don't talk about who else you're talking to, you don't really do much of that. But it's like that is really interesting.
Yeah. It is really different, I think, kind of developing. I think here it would always, in the UK, it'd always be like the paper is really important. Like we'd write so much. And I think actually pitching to the States is better some ways, because I do think it's a visual medium. We should be pitching on tape. At Utopia, that was something that they invested in really heavily in their development team. They had 2 edits constantly running to cut sizzles, and a dedicated edit producer who sat across those sizzles, and that was his job. So if your development team of, say, 10, like 4 of those people were just on sizzles, and they would generate sizzles like weekly. It was a constant churn. And the sizzles to pitch to talent. So not even just sizzles going to market. It would just be, we've got this idea. Agent goes, yeah, I think he'd be interested. You do a tape for that talent to get them to attach. And I think that's the thing that is difficult, because it's an outlay for a small production company. But that's the shift I think you need to make in your mind. If you're like, right, I'm going to pitch to America, you have to lay everything on the line and say this. There is no reason you can say no to this. Whereas in the UK, you can be a lot more sort of ground up and just say, I've got this thought, and I really think this story is interesting, and here's some rushes I've shot on my phone. So yeah, that's the difference that I feel between them.
So interesting. What sensibilities do you feel like development producers in the UK have that maybe we over in the USA could use more of?
I think we take more risks because we're allowed to, because our budgets are not as high. And I think it's much easier to take a risk with a channel when they're not outlaying, nearly $1 million for a 90 or a 2-parter on Netflix. I think and also, again, having that strong public service broadcaster remit from the BBC and Channel 4, where they have to do things that question and, create news headlines. Channel 4 always still say that, when you're pitching to them, you have to think about what would our biggest tabloid newspaper get angry about? Like, what's going to make front page headlines when they go, how dare they do this? As a UK producer working in docs and formats, you always learn to push as hard as you can. And that is something, interestingly, I've been asked for a lot more recently at some of the networks. A&E, for example, known for doing things like 60 Days In. People don't come to them anymore with those really outlandish, brave ideas, because they're expensive and it's risky for a production company to take on. But actually, those are the ones that I think British producers find the most exciting.
It's so interesting. I think even your attitudes about other things, like I think of Naked Attraction, right? And how that could never happen here without censor bars, or, even Love Island, the way when it started out, I just think that your attitudes and sensibilities about, sex, nudity, there's so many things that I think that producers over here, we have to play it safer a bit. And I find that, yeah, it does feel like there's much more risk in the UK And typically that's followed by a lot of reward, which is nice. But isn't it it's so interesting to me to think about how deeply just the way that society is structured here versus there, how it affects the market. And I know that that sounds silly, like of course it would, but it really does. Like even even the way you're saying like, oh, we don't have strict pitches where we're sitting down and we're doing something. We just are having coffee and having a conversation. I mean, that attitude comes from, something deeply held in society and how you have relationships with people, just as the very quick, you have 30 minutes, it's all on the line right here is so American.
I think also maybe a lot of it is due to the fact that Brits are not very good at saying no, and they don't like offending people. So
Mm,
I think actually maybe the pitch
mm.
system has developed from the fact that they want to have a nice chat with you, and then they really should say no a lot sooner than they do, but they just don't want to hurt your feelings. Whereas in America, it's
Yeah.
like, we'll get your agent to do it for you, or just be like, no, that's not for us.
Right.
That's, no hard feelings, which is actually probably a lot more healthy for your development bank balance.
I will say in the early parts of my career, I would have taken the UK all day long. But as you go, you realize that when they take forever to give you feedback or talk to you or say no, you're like, I would just, if you know the answer, just tell me no and tell me good luck. Yeah, that's so interesting. I bet Australia, it makes you think Australia is the same way, because I feel like they're also known for being incredibly nice and like not wanting to do that either. But they also have like the tall poppy syndrome too, right? So it's so interesting to think about how that influences what the development market looks like as well.
Yeah, I know. I spent a year working in development in Sydney, and it was so interesting
Okay.
because because documentary companies there hate the fact that most of their TV is sort of flooded with American formats. So, the Biggest Loser was one of the biggest shows on Australian TV, and Australian TV is fascinating because they don't really watch TV very much. They're out at the beach. TV is something that is not held
Hmm.
in. You work in TV in Australia, it's like, oh, could you not get a proper job? It's not held in the esteem that we hold it in. Which is one of the
Right.
reasons I came home, because
That's
I was
so
like,
funny.
if you say to me we work for the BBC, like in the UK, they're like, yeah. Whereas in Australia, it's sort of, but then when a format catches light, like MasterChef Australia, I was there for the first series of MasterChef Australia, where a third of the country, 7 million people, watched MasterChef Australia, and then the final, they had fireworks over Sydney Opera House. It was like a huge event. But the docs people they just hate the fact that it feels like American TV and it's all American imports. So they fight really hard, but then they just end up trying to pitch stuff that feels like British TV rather than, really clinging on to what is really quintessentially Australian. I mean, it's definitely changed a lot more. The production companies come on leaps and bounds since I lived there. Then I was like, oh, I just spent the whole time going, I'm really sorry, that's already a British show, so you can't make that. But it was a really interesting experience.
It is interesting because you think about, I think there are cornerstones of what feels like British TV, American TV, Korean formats, Japanese formats. Like they feel like they have this sort of hallmark. So, but Australia is maybe still finding out what theirs is. So I want to talk about this selfishly and because I know people want to hear it, but you had a development at Hidden Light Pictures, again, founded by, Hillary and Chelsea Clinton. We have a lot of production companies with high profile founders, whether they're political figures, or athletes now, or, whatever. And so what does it look like to work alongside these two who are so high profile and also very much at the peak of their exposure?
Yeah, I mean, when we started Hidden Light, yeah, Hillary had just done her big documentary on Hulu, which was sort of following the whole disaster of when she didn't get in, and was so
That is what we
close.
call it.
Yeah, sorry, I should probably be a bit more apolitical, but I'm always will be Team Hillary. So I think, yeah, it was a really, really interesting experience for me. I think conditions you just to be very, very aware of everything that you do and every email you write, because it can reflect back not just on your company, but also on a bigger brand and someone's family and their personal life. So I was sort of aware of that. It was when we set up Hidden Light, we were very conscious that we wouldn't announce it until we got a commission, because you're right, there were a lot of sort of celebrity production companies that were out there. So we really wanted to come out of the gate and say, here we are, but here we also got this massive series for Apple as well. So that was really key to us. But day to day, what was amazing about it is it's for people who are so brilliant and so hardworking. They were really hands off with us. There was real trust there. And I think that's what makes Hillary and Chelsea quite unique, in that they surround themselves with really inspirational 99% women who they trust to do their job, which is very empowering. Every so often we check in with them, but 9 times out of 10 they'd say, well, you employ that person if you believe that they're right, or you run with that story if you think that's good. There were only a couple of things that they said, no, I don't think we should go there. But it was a real feeling of collaboration and an utter joy, I think, I had weekly meetings with Huma and Barry, who are their chiefs of staff, and just to be in that world of inspiring and intelligent, clever, funny women 24/7 was just quite amazing. And and it was lovely when Hillary would come to a brainstorm and say, oh, is it all right if I share an idea with you? I'm like, of course. And her ideas were always really good, which such a relief. So yeah, amazing.
Yes, I can imagine it the other way. I mean, when you look at, I think of, comps are, Archwell with Harry and Meghan, Higher Ground, which is the Obama's production company. And when I talk to them and I partner with them, their mandates and the pillars of what they're looking for are typically reflective of who they are, what they stand for, what they're interested in, what they're known for. And so what were your mandates at Hidden Light, and how did you guys approach your slate?
I mean, it was very similar. I mean, we were set up as a female first production company. So our main thing out the gate was always female protagonists. So, and also female directors. So it was pretty much everyone who worked at the company was a woman. And the projects we were looking for were sort of taking the sort of big subjects of the moment, but telling them through a female lens or an underrepresented lens. So, for example, we did a big feature doc about Ukraine, and there were a lot of ones that came out, like Mariupol and those sort of films that were incredible. Why ours was different is we partnered with the Clooney Foundation to follow Amal Clooney's work and the work of a female war crimes investigator and her female sort of partner in crime. So you're essentially following these incredible kind of trailblazing, hardcore women who are on the front line trying to gather evidence to take Putin to a tribunal. So it's like, where is the female and quite unexpected story behind that? So that was our main thing. Obviously, we had Siobhan Sinnerton working for us, who had made Forsama. So we were trying to find those stories that shone a light on the world, but I mean, tried not to feel too overtly political. And that was tough, because at the beginning, I think maybe we did go too political and we were slightly punished for that. We made In Her Hands, which was a film about a young female mayor in Afghanistan. And as we were filming, Kabul fell. So the film became something very different and something incredibly impactful. But, it's one of the biggest things that I learned working at Hidden Light is that you have to be so aware of not just Hillary as Secretary's politics, but also what she did when she was Secretary of State, how people react to that, and also the president's politics as well. What did he do when he was in office? So it's really important to not draw attention away from the point of the film by giving people a reason to have a problem with it. And Afghanistan proved to be a really, really tricky minefield for us. And in retrospect, would we have had her on it as an EP? It's sort of these difficult questions, because they bring a huge platform that you can then get this amazing impact campaign about getting girls into schools against the Taliban. But at the same time, it's a real balancing act. The mandates were on one hand, the purposeful docs that you feel like you have to make, and that those are often privately funded. So the one we did with Jennifer Lawrence about abortion rights, that felt, we couldn't sell that anywhere, but it was important to us to make it. And we got funding from people like Bumble and Bloomberg for that. And then on the other hand, what I was trying to do was sort of open up a more commercial side of the slate. So there was more of a balance. So we did a 2-part geopolitical thriller about the Kursk submarine. And we did a sort of 2-part shamanic scam scandal that's just gone out on the BBC. So it was sort of trying to find a way in the market that didn't feel like it undermined anything that the Clintons stood for, and trying to use them in a way that felt good and true and didn't, detract from what we were trying to achieve as a company.
And not an easy job to balance, especially you look at a film and go, young women getting access to school in Afghanistan. Who can argue against that? But because of potentially the figureheads you have behind it, how polarized we've become as a country, it suddenly becomes a difficult project. So I'm sure that was just such a challenge for you. I can't imagine the growth from that. You mentioned that Hillary would sometimes come to brainstorms and have ideas, and they were always great. I mean, what else kind of surprised you about working with Hillary and Chelsea?
We started working together in lockdown, and like full proper lockdown. And that was really revealing because, you saw them as their families would see them, Chelsea with 3 children climbing all over them because they've been separated from the nannies, and like Hillary just as she was. And it was really refreshing. And the same with the chief of staff, actually. Like I had a 18-month-old at the time, and Barry, Chelsea's chief of staff, had the same. And it was really grounding to sort of see each other in that world. I think I was surprised at how funny and fun Hillary was, and how commercial she was in what she liked to watch. Like the Kardashians was one of her favorite shows. So when we made Gutsy, it was a real push to get Kim Kardashian in our Justice episode, which we achieved. So it was just, and just how amenable they were to sort of trying to help us with various things. One of Hillary's ideas was to get access to Buckingham Palace. And I was like, I'm sure everyone has tried to get that after a while. It's a great idea. I mean, who wouldn't want to watch that? But it's really tricky. And then the next day I found myself having the most surreal moment of my career so far, where I was drafting a letter from the secretary to the King of England, but she refers to him as Charles, and then it goes back to her and she rewrites the letter and then helps me put it in front of King Charles. So that was one of the more surprising things that I found myself doing.
I don't know what you do. Can you screenshot the email and just frame it? I mean, but it goes to show you in this line of work, it opens up there's just so many different worlds you explore, so many different avenues, and it can open up surreal moments like that. It's so incredible. Were there any other major takeaways from that experience with Hidden Light specifically?
I think what was really helpful about it was learning how to, I think behave is the wrong word, but how to present myself in the best way to people who are very important and have little time. And that is something that I've taken with me. At Utopia, I think I could talk to the producers when we were working with someone like Tom Hanks, for example. I could explain how you have to make sure that when they come into a room that everything is prepared for them, and how to brief your talent on exactly what's going to be happening. Because I always, when anyone started at Hidden Light, I'd show them that clip from The Devil's Wears Prada, where Emily Blunt is walking behind Meryl Streep and saying, this is this person, this is exactly, they have the special book that has everyone's photograph in it. And that's exactly what we would do for if we had a drinks party or a film reception or a Q&A or a premiere. We would spend 2 weeks basically working out who all the guests were, what the talking points were, because it is about preparing your principals for those events, because it's a lot. They get overwhelmed by the amount of people that want to say hello to them, and that for me has stayed with me. as a way I now, the way Huma taught me to write letters to, people in incredibly influential positions and how to present myself, I think has been an absolutely valuable lesson that I've learned.
Oh, that's really incredible. And to be and those are all things they can be learned, but only really by immersion, right? Like someone could teach you this, but it really takes you, I think, actually being there in those situations to really learn. Speaking of that, you lecture on factual development, you run courses on idea generation. I mean, right now, what would you say your students struggle with the most?
I think the biggest thing that they struggle with, and that I struggle with too, is the difference between an idea and an area. I think a lot of people say, oh, I just really want to do something about this. And you've always got to think, like, what is it? Like, what is either your access that's going to take you into that world, or who is your presenter, who's your talent? What question are you actually asking, and what's your hook? Like, what are people going to come and watch? Because they're not going to come and watch a documentary about, gay marriage, for example, but they will watch, as we did over here. We did a live when same-sex marriage was legalized. They did a big event, which was like a musical where people got married live, and it's sort of, what is your entertaining proposition around your message? And I think sometimes it's really, really hard to tell people that, your idea at the moment is just a newspaper article, it's just a portrait. Like, what is your narrative that's going to take you through? What's your part for? So that's the hardest thing, I think.
It's a great point. And so with that in mind, in the marketplace right now, I mean, what do you think separates a good idea from one that actually sells?
Think it's about elevating that idea to making it as sellable as possible. So I think a good idea, the way to make it sellable, it's got to have a home. So it's, in order to make it sellable, you've got to find somewhere that actually will commission that idea. It's all very well having a really great documentary idea, but if it doesn't fit the Netflix remit, or if it doesn't apply for it, if it wouldn't work for private funding, then it's not a great idea anymore, because it's not going to sell at this moment. But then I think it's also about working out how to give that idea the best shot to make it sellable. So, do you need to partner with another production company? A bit like Squid Game, The Challenge, for example, on Netflix. That was a great idea that a documentary company had, but it only became a sellable idea when they were partnered with Studio Lambert, who are obviously like the format gods of the market at the moment. And then, do you need talent? Does it make more sense if you've got, Kate McKinnon doing something about weird stuff? If you're trying to pitch something to Nat Geo, for example, you need Marvel talent on there like Chris Hemsworth, who can really make sure that idea is sellable and can sit on a Disney tile up against big Marvel movies. So it's constantly about asking yourself, how am I going to make this idea really, really be something that people can't say no to? So it's all about the packaging.
Great. It's all great advice. What excites you enough to keep doing this? I ask this because, and I don't think this is just performative LinkedIn posts. I mean, a lot of people are feeling stalled out right now, feeling discouraged. So what maybe would be your advice to them? And then what excites you about this and kind of keeps you going?
I'd say that in this country, in the UK, there's just been such a resurgence in watching live telly and watching TV as it happens and as it unfolds, and it's become part of the national conversation. I think nearly 10 million people, watch The Traitors, and that has been something that you walk past people in the park and they're discussing it no matter what age they are, and families will watch it together. And it's been something that we've not had that in a while, where you have to get home from work and you have to watch it because everyone will be talking about it tomorrow. So I feel like we're having a bit of a resurgence in our country in that appointment of view, which is really exciting and makes you want to be part of an industry that's sort of galvanizing everyone in really dark times. I think for me, why I get excited about this industry is how fast it evolves. When I went on maternity leave with my second child, I came back and felt like I was just relearning again. I was at Hidden Light and I was suddenly learning about equity caps and private funding and distributor models and what Netflix were doing and new channels that were appearing and channels that were disappearing, and different Roku came and HBO Max went and CNN stopped commissioning, and then everyone wanted co-pros. So I feel like I find it so exciting if you can keep up with it, which us TV geeks love to. So that for me it will never feel like we're standing still in this industry. And that's why I will always super, super love it. But I think what would be my advice, I mean, in this country, we have a lot of amazing free courses that you can go on and try and upskill or find different ways into the industry. I think just like finding yourself a network. When I was having a difficult time in the industry, I became part of this WhatsApp group, which was all senior development people. And not only has it led to new work and new opportunities, but it's just really lovely to have other people say around a glass of wine, this is really hard. Like, this is really hard. So it's just, I think your network will always save you. That's, as a freelancer, it's been my network that's provided me with work. That's the industry we live in. Yeah, I think learn as much as you can and try and upskill for the cheapest way you can. Volunteer at festivals because then you get free passes. Just keep yourself immersed in that world. And just watch as much as you can as well. That's the best education there is.
I agree wholeheartedly. Wonderful advice. Thank you so much. You mentioned Traders UK. What else are you watching right now? What do you love to watch?
I love Industry. You guys, I don't know if you have Industry. Well, I think it's BBC America.
I just started. I just started and I'm hooked. So
yeah.
You are the second person who's mentioned this to me this week. So yeah, okay.
It is just, it's real. Someone said this to me, which I thought was really, I think they said it on the Goal Hanger Rest Entertainment podcast, that if you know Industry, you love it, but it's not something that's for everyone. But I just think it's just brilliant storytelling. And it's risky and it sort of pushes it out there. And sometimes you're like, this is a bit much. But I love shows like that really grab you. So yeah, watching that. We've just watched the final of our favourite quiz show, which is a so geeky British quiz show called Only Connect, which is incredibly tricky and we can never answer a single question. But there's something about like participating in TV when there's two of you after a long day that I quite love. A very, very tricky quiz show.
Yes, that is why the Jeopardy comes on at like 7:30 in the evening here. And you're right. There's just something great about whoever's beside you, whether it's your partner or your grandpa, and you guys are just like, for 30 minutes, we're going to be contestants. I love that.
Yeah.
Can you think of the worst note you've ever received?
So when I was a development AP at a production company, I was cutting a sizzle that was the worst sizzle ever anyway. It was for an idea that was not mine, that was called Hypnotize Me or It's Divorce. And the idea was that the man would be hypnotized and then not, and basically help around the house. It was so misogynistic and terrible. But you know, this was TV in the early 2000s. So not only did I have to cut that sizzle that I really railed against as a strong woman. I mean, Hillary would have lost her mind. But the note that I got at midnight on a Friday night was, I really think this American voiceover is grating. We need a Canadian. So I had to go and I knew one Canadian I knew one Canadian person. I had to like drag her out of the pub to come and do my voiceover. It was horrific.
That's hilarious because it's like, what are they looking for? Note that there are differences in the way we speak, but it's not quite so obvious. What unscripted show do you think epitomizes the industry?
I mean, I would say, because I mentioned it before, but Squid Game The Challenge is really interesting to me. That it was, not created, but, it was pitched by a documentary company who are known in this country for doing sort of really amazing hospital documentaries and police documentaries and police procedurals. And they pitched this and everyone was like, that's interesting, it's coming from there. But they were clever enough and didn't have enough of an ego that they went, do you know what, we can't do this on our own, and joined up with Studio Lambert. And I think that sort of epitomizes where we are in this industry, in that companies can't do it all anymore, and they shouldn't. You should just know what you are best in class at, and if you're not, then reach out to someone else and partner. And actually the show becomes so good, because what for me makes that show brilliant is that you really invest in the characters, and that's a documentary casting job. And the documentary team build those emotional narratives throughout that series, and then you have the incredible entertainment chops of Studio Lambert that are making sure it's perfect and the gameplay is amazing. So yeah, that would be my pick.
That's a great answer. It's such an ambitious show, but it works so well. What are you tired of seeing? What are you a bit fatigued on right now?
I'm quite bored of a travelogue where I can really feel the hand of the producer really heavily. And it's like, I think maybe like, and something that we refer to in my household as FJ, which is false jeopardy, where it's like, oh, where are we going to go now? It just so happens we should go here. I don't know. I love Clarkson's Farm on Amazon, which is I mean, obviously he's got lots of money. He's bought a farm. There's not so much jeopardy there, but it actually is really happening in real time. He's running a farm. He's running a business, and it feels much more real. And I just love authenticity. I just think I'm a doc maker through and through. I've spent my life like filming stuff that unfolds as you watch it. I think I'm a bit allergic to everything that feels really overly constructed.
Yeah, definitely. So what is one doc that you feel like everyone should watch right now?
So I thought about this a lot, and I could have said Perfect Neighbor, but everyone will say that because it's been nominated for an Oscar, and it is nominated for an Oscar, and it is brilliant. But I think I love the Lewis Capaldi documentary on Netflix, which I really do, because it really feels truly honest and true to him. It's a really clever way in that you start at the end and then there's a rewind, and then you go straight into him in lockdown trying to deal with his mental health, with his Tourette's, but also trying to write his next album in his parents' backyard. And it's so real, and he is so funny, and there's no pretension to it. It was so different for me from the Robbie Williams docs and the Beckhams, which were great in their own way. But I just loved him instantly. And I just felt so strongly towards wanting only good things for him, because he was just open and honest, and it unfolded like a natural, verite documentary. So I think that will always be one of my favorites.
Okay, I will add it to my list. Well, Nicky, this has been so wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing your experiences. This has been really great, and hopefully we can cross paths again soon.
Yeah, that would be lovely. Thank you so much for having me. It's an absolute joy to talk about the world of development, which is, my spiritual home.
Yes, thank you. Thank you guys so much for joining me. I could listen to Nicky talk all day long. Don't forget, follow us on Instagram at UnscriptedFilesPod. Subscribe, rate, review, share, post. It all helps. Thank you so much for listening, and we'll be back next week with more Unscripted Files. Thanks.